surge, huge rain, flooding possible. Jacob Lichtner lives on the outskirts of New Orleans East.
We're just kind of sitting in the house, cooking some dinner, getting it ready, hoping that the power don't go out.
Francine's top winds are 100 miles an hour. 3 fast-spreading Southern California wildfires are threatening several communities. Thousands of National Guard, firefighters, and other first responders are at the fire lines. A vote on a temporary spending bill to avoid a partial government shutdown has been pulled by House Speaker Mike Johnson. It would have required people registering to vote to provide proof of citizenship. Remembrances across the country marking 23 years since the September 11th attacks at the Flight 93 crash site in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Victims' names were read. This is ABC News. A new study shows that more women chose to have their tubes tied after Roe v. Wade was overturned in 2022. Research in the Journal of the American Medical Association examined insurance claims from 2021 and 22. The study also shows the biggest increases were in states that ban abortion. With last night's debate fresh in voters' minds, some states are starting to send out these.
The first general election absentee ballots of the cycle are being mailed Wednesday in Alabama. Originally, the first ballots were planned to be sent out on September 6th in North Carolina. But the process was delayed after a judge ruled that ballots needed to be reprinted. Absentee voters in Pennsylvania and Kentucky will be able to begin casting their ballots in less than a week's time. Brittany Shepard, ABC News, Washington.
Campbell's Soups will be dropping the soups from its name. It'll now just be known as the Campbell's Company. Change subject to shareholder approval. Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
Tired of ads interrupting your favorite news podcast? Good news. Ad-free listening on Amazon Music is included with your Prime membership. Yeah, stay up to date on everything newsworthy with podcasts like The Daily, Up First, and 5 Things, uninterrupted at Amazon.com/ad-free. Just head to Amazon.com/ad-free to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
You can host the best backyard barbecue when you find a professional on Angie to make your backyard the best around. Connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. Inside to outside, repairs to renovations. Get started on the Angie app or visit Angie.com today. You can do this when you Angie that.
The views and opinions of the following show do not reflect those of WSMN, its owners, and/or associates.
Welcome to the Common Sense Conservatives, a political discussion group about current events and other government-related matters every Wednesday evening from 7 to 8 p.m. Right here on WSMN 1590 AM, WSMN 95.3 FM, and streaming live on wsmn.live. Making sense of the inverted reality we are subject to every day, the Common Sense Conservatives are here to help bring you back to reality. Now, your hosts, Chris Wyatt, Todd McKinley, and John Groven.
All right. Hey, folks, welcome back to the Common Sense Conservatives. I'm Todd McKinley. If it's 7 o'clock Eastern, it is the Common Sense Conservatives. Can you guys hear me there loud and clear? I see the Colonel's, thumbs up from the Colonel. All right. So we'll go to the Colonel there in Central PA before we go to John in Nashua in the studio. Colonel, how are you, sir?
Well, I'm very fine. I'm quite excited. Last night was amazing. It was wonderful. We're going to win. Princess Kamala was absolutely amazing. Combine that with the news that Campbell Soup has changed its name, and it's just been a wonderful day for me. We'll talk about it a lot in the second hour, but oh my goodness, a lot of criticism I have for Trump, who missed, softball pitches right down the plate, going 80 miles an hour, not exactly fastballs, on abortion and a host of other things. We'll talk about that in the second hour after our guest. But listen, I got to say that I'm incredibly nonplussed by the non-event last night. And as I predicted, the only way the needle changed last night is if she imploded with cackles and, couldn't speak and couldn't deliver. But her SEAL trainers did a good job training her last night. And they fed her fish, and she did a great job, spurging her little one-liners. And so she didn't implode. So as I predicted, the needle didn't move. And the leftist media is out of their minds today, not understanding how the world can't fall in love with the greatest debate performance in the history of the United States, according to the corrupt media. Anyway, I digress. We'll talk more in the second hour, but I'm pretty fine other than that. I did stay in a Red Roof Inn last night. No.
Yeah. So, John, they're in the studio, holding down the studio there in Nashua, New Hampshire, is John Grosvenor. John, how are you, kind sir?
Well, I'm doing good. All of New Hampshire's got to be wondering what they're thinking. They woke up this morning and found out globalist Kelly Ayotte won the gubernatorial primary against Chuck Morris. I'm dumbfounded, absolutely dumbfounded by that. We got a couple interesting wins. Lily Tang is going to move forward against Goodlander. That's going to be kind of interesting. Lily Tang comes from communist China, so sure, her strong suit is she is in it to fight communism and communist growth in the United States. So, possibly a very, very good candidate in that regard. Very nice lady. I've met her. I've talked to her. I like Lily as a person anyway. So we'll see how this goes, man. But I don't think any of our people, Teresa didn't get her position. Bob Burns, we've had him on the show. He didn't get it either. It was kind of interesting. The people that got the positions, I just totally didn't expect it, to be honest with you. But that's the way it goes in these primaries. You just never know how they're going to turn out.
Right. Hey, John, before you run off, I just got to tell you, if you want to fight Chinese communist spies, just go to New York. They work for the New York Fire Department Commissioner or the Police Department Commissioner. They work for the governor of New York. They're everywhere. And, the FBI investigates them 4 years ago and takes no action while they continue to spy on us. Just saying, it's not far away from New Hampshire. It's a short hop, skip, and a jump down the I-95.
Now, the FBI want to do a very thorough job and make sure all their T's crossed and their I's dotted. And it'd take them like a decade or two, but they'll get there.
Listen, John, I have nothing but disdain for the Federal Bureau of Incompetence. Sorry, whisper mode. Black helicopters outside my window.
You know it.
All right, get us going.
All right. So I guess today, obviously, as everybody knows, is the 23rd anniversary of 9/11. And I certainly know where I was on 9/11, stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I dare say the Colonel does, and John, and anybody else, and knows what happened in the days, weeks, months, and of course, for some of us during our military career, years after 9/11, we kind of know where we were. But I was fortunate enough to be stationed again at the White House Communications Agency, as some people know, and got to know this guy. Well, I got to know the vice president's photographer a lot better, but I got to know this guy, on occasion in passing, stuff like that. His name is Eric Draper. Sorry, ladies, he's not brothers with Don Draper. But he was the official White House photographer for George W. Bush, aka 43, our president during that time frame. For those who are too young to know, for our younger viewers who may not remember, but he's been an Associated Press photographer. He's covered the 2000 and of course the 1996 RNC or presidential campaigns, 2000 Summer Olympics. He's covered the Kosovo conflict. I know the Colonel will be happy to talk about that for sure. The FIFA World Cup as well. I know that's another thing the Colonel may be interested in. But he was there with President George W. Bush on 9/11 and covered him, obviously, during his entire presidency. But that day specifically, and of course, the days and weeks afterwards. And we're going to talk to him about his experience and, of course, his career, if he was as a photographer, a professional photographer, whenever we can bring him in here. His name is Eric Draper, ladies and gentlemen. Eric, sir, thank you for being on the Common Sense Conservatives. Really, really, truly appreciate it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Todd. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for making time to be able to be here. Real quick, if you could give everybody a little bit about your background. I know I kind of maybe touched on a few things that's on your Wikipedia page there, if you don't mind. How you got into photography and how you got to the White House.
Well, I was a kid growing up in LA, just interested in photography as a creative outlet. And a friend of mine, I was at a junior college in Southern California. He asked me to join the newspaper staff there. And that's where I fell in love with photojournalism, to be able to have my photo published, my name under the photo. And I had a front row seat to every sporting event at the college. And I think everything combined with that really got me going. And I wanted to come out of school to become a newspaper photographer. And that's what I did. I went to journalism school at Cal State Long Beach in California, and ended up, my first job out of college was at the Seattle Times. Ended up going back to LA to work at the Pasadena Star News, and then the Albuquerque Tribune, and then the Associated Press. So a lot of moving around during early in my career as a news photographer.
Right, absolutely. And I know I can relate to that, being in the military for 20 years, moving around a lot. Outstanding. So how did you get recruited? And I think I may have heard the story from Dave Bohr before of how you got recruited to be at the White House.
Well, back when I was an Associated Press photographer, I would cover every political cycle. They would put me on a candidate. And at the time, it was Governor Bush from Texas, never ever thinking it would ever lead to the White House. And so I covered the campaign like literally over a year on the campaign trail. And actually, you might remember the election was not decided that night in 2000.
Oh yeah, we remember. Remember.
Well, I blame everything on the recount, because during the recount, everything kind of stopped, and I kind of dropped off the map to recover. But that's when I decided to pursue the position once I realized I had a shot at it. And what I decided to do was take a page out of President Bush's playbook, because during the campaign, which I think his stump speech was echoing in my head, after a year of hearing it, he would always say, "I'm going to look you in the eye and ask you for the job. I want to be your president." So lucky enough, timing is everything. I discovered my wife and I were invited to a party at the governor's mansion in Austin, and this was perfect timing. The Supreme Court had ruled Governor Bush had won. He had just become president-elect. So at the end of the party, I was prepared. I had a portfolio, I had a cover letter, but I knew, going directly to him, and I made my pitch, and I walked up to him. I said, thank you for inviting us to the party. By the way, I want to be your personal photographer. And I looked at him and I didn't blink. And he was shaking my hand the entire time. And he looked away, he looked at me and he said, Eric, I really appreciate that. I'll get back to you. And a week later, I'm sitting in front of Andy Card interviewing for the position. And it all happened very, very quickly.
Right. Absolutely. That's great. For those who don't know, Secretary Andrew Card was President Bush's chief of staff in the initial Bush administration, I think for the first four plus years, for those who don't know. But what I'd like to do real quick is maybe toss it around the horn here. We usually like to go to the Colonel for some of the questions. But before we do, real quick, what was your feelings whenever you first heard of that first plane hitting the Twin Towers?
Well, we were arriving at the school in Sarasota, Florida, just as the news was breaking about the first plane hitting the first tower. And everyone thought it was just a horrible accident. I remember I was sitting next to Ari Fleischer, the press secretary, in the staff van. And back then, we didn't have our smartphone or iPhones, but he had a pager. And he said, "Oh my God, a plane hit the World Trade Center." And, everyone thought it was a tragic accident as we were rolling into the event. And it wasn't until the whisper in the ear moment happened where we knew that something bad was happening. And for me, I was kind of clueless in terms of like America being under attack until actually the president actually left the classroom and he went to the hold room next to the classroom where there was a live TV of the burning towers. And that's when everyone who walked into the room was just frozen looking at that image. And I was thinking to myself, this is going to be a very big day. And I knew I couldn't let the president out of my sight.
Right. Absolutely. And that's the famous picture you took of him sitting in front of the Stu 3, the secure phone right there, the big black phone that he had. And that was a very famous photo that you took for sure. But Colonel, go ahead and jump in with the question if you want to, sir.
Well, I was going to ask how he got the gig, but I've already been preempted on that one, so we'll move on to the next question. Listen, John, I don't know if we've got a technical problem or if it's LA Lakers dribbling in the background, but I keep hearing sounds running around there. I'm not sure. Listen, I got to be honest with you, Todd. I almost balked on tonight's broadcast. I stopped watching the NBA when Jordan retired for the second time. I lost interest in it. Yeah. And if it wasn't for that fact, there's no way I could do a conversation with a Lakers fan. I'm sorry. It's just painful. Oh. It's absolutely painful, but we'll make the most of it, Eric. Okay. But thanks for
I get that a lot.
To clear it up, Chris,
sure.
It's a Celtics because when they dribble the ball, they dribble it loud.
Hey, that's the Celtics. Don't you know how to say that? Anyway, but Eric, Eric, thanks for being with us tonight. Really appreciate it. Now, did you snap the photograph, the one that was misused by the media later on, or was it the AP or somebody, when the president was initially informed and he sat there and they claimed that he was frozen in the classroom and didn't know what to do? Was that a photograph that you took or someone else?
Actually, there were news photographers. The White House press pool was in that room, and all those photographers captured that moment. Yeah.
That's what I thought. Yeah, I was just curious about that one because that's one of those iconic images that's been abused and misused and misstated for some. Kind of like when the president was out on the aircraft carrier, he said mission accomplished, and in fact, the mission that was stated was accomplished, and that's been misused by people. So it's a shame. It's amazing the power of photography, Eric. I mean, so when you got into this, did you have any experience or knowledge or the history of how photography plays a role in making history? For instance, you got some very famous iconic photographs like the young lady after the napalm bombing in Vietnam that just seared in people's memories. Is that something you were aware of growing up and maybe helped your interest, or just something you learned about later on?
Oh yeah, that photo, for example, was taken by Nick Utt of the Associated Press. I actually worked with him alongside him at the AP bureau in LA. So he and I were colleagues, and yeah, those are my heroes, and that's I looked up to those photographers, and I wanted to be one of those photographers, not knowing where I would end up, but yeah, those are images, and those are photographers that definitely I definitely really wanted to be that kind of photographer.
Well, let me ask you a rather mundane question, lighten it up a little bit here, because that's kind of a heavy photograph. That's a very, very much history-making photograph, but a light question. So how was the transition from film to digital as a photographer in this business? I remember when I was teaching at Iowa State in 1995, I taught ROTC there, and I was writing articles, and I shared them with the college campus newspaper. They had $25,000 digital cameras, which today are not even as good as the worst cell phone. But the point is that that's when the digital transition, but already in the news industry, people had those expensive cameras that today you can get for just a couple $100. To make that change, you obviously were in the industry when the switch was going on from film to digital. And there are a lot of, people who didn't like changing, others who like changing. I got to tell you, as a journalist, I'm not a photojournalist, but I do take a lot of photos to support my writing. But the thing I love is just how many photos I can take, and I don't have to worry about wasting money on film. What are your thoughts on that? What was that transition like for you?
Well, for me, working at the Associated Press, we were on the cutting edge of that digital revolution. The Associated Press were marketing the very first digital camera for photojournalists. For all you techies out there, it's called the NC2000. It was a horrible camera, just horrible. But back then it was the latest, greatest. I mean, it didn't have a screen on the back. It had a very small resolution. You had to do a lot of it, a lot of work in Photoshop to make it look good. But I made it look good. And the Associated Press realized how I embraced that technology, and they were sending me all over the world, covering everything, major sporting events, civil unrest in other countries, and of course, political campaigns. I was literally one of the first photographers to transmit photos from a moving van during a political campaign. So it was very that technology back then was cutting edge, and so I just would follow that technology until and when I was in the White House, they were actually behind the times. They were literally like a decade behind. So I had to direct that transition from film to digital, which was literally a nightmare because the volume was so huge, and we couldn't stop in the White House. We had to continue to document things, and that was the most difficult part was making sure that everything was covered and making sure everything was going to be part of the historical archive, but also making sure that the archive was maintained securely and we didn't lose images. And we were dealing with the early versions of those cameras, which were not the best in terms of low light photography, which we did a lot in the White House with, very low light photography where you didn't want to have a flash to interrupt the scene. So, but I was happy as that technology got better and better, the cameras got better and better, and eventually in the second term of the Bush administration, we became 100% digital workflow, and it really worked out for the best.
Well, as a videographer, a photojournalist, you really went through some pretty heady times there in the late 90s, early part of the new millennium. I mean, you got to do the FIFA World Cup in France, then you were in Sydney for the Olympics, then you were covering wall to wall this election campaign, and then tragically, but historically, it's something seared in our memory collectively for the rest of our lives and maybe generations, 9/11. That's quite a busy, hectic period of time. Looking back, obviously, I'm sure there were some amazing moments that you cherish and remember very well. Also, probably some painful moments. But can you give us a couple highlights of maybe each of those things? The 1998 FIFA World Cup in France. I think France won that one, didn't they?
That's right. Yeah, the host country. It was a blast. And soccer is like a religion in all these other countries. And I mean, definitely, the passion, the sporting event itself, the action, the fans, the soccer hooligans out in the streets. You know, it was a blast to cover. And then when France won the World Cup, the entire city was like one large big party. So being able to cover the championship match against Brazil, it was a blast. And being at the Associated Press, we covered every major sporting event. Winter Olympics, Summer Olympics. It was awesome. Really, really enjoyed that. And I also covered a lot of major events. Being in Los Angeles, I covered the O.J. Simpson trial, for example. I was one of the few photographers who was actually at the crime scene that morning, and actually walked in the blood. You might remember on the walkway. So things like that. I've definitely been in some really incredible situations with my camera.
So we have a scoop here tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We can now explain why Marsha Clark was unsuccessful in her prosecution. Eric Draper he contaminated the crime scene at Brentwood. You've been busted. Yeah, got you better. We busted you. No,
That's where that extra shoe print came from.
That's right. Yeah, I bet the glove fit that night, right? No, but seriously, he contaminated the crime scene. No, but that's interesting. I had no idea that you were involved in that. That was kind of, the OJ thing. I was overseas, and it's like I didn't even know it happened. And so when I started paying attention, I'm like, what OJ? What happened to OJ? Man, I could never imagine. But, the reason I asked specifically about 1998 is because I was just in France for the Rugby World Cup this past fall, about a year ago now. And it was amazing. The French, I speak French. But I was a little surprised at just how amazing it was. Pricey, of course, because everything's inflated. But the French were pretty good. I was able to get around. It was literally planes, trains, and automobiles. I rented a car for a month. And a couple times I'd leave it in town to take the train to get from one place to another because it was more practical. And once or twice I had to fly from place to place. But planes, trains, and automobiles, that's how I got around. It was pretty cool. So Sydney. Now, Sydney, as I recall, was a pretty incredible Olympics. Back then, I still had an interest going to Australia. Any special moments from the Sydney Olympics?
I remember I covered swimming, which was one of the top sporting events at the Summer Games, and also track and field. And I remember covering a lot of. I think it was. I'm trying to remember who was the highlight of that Summer Olympics at track and field, but Jacker Joyner Kersey won the long jump. I remember being right in front of her celebrating. I remember how gracious the Australians were. I mean, I guess that having to travel that far, they're definitely were very nice, great hosts. It was an amazing Olympics to cover, and it's one of those things that every day there was this a lot of action to cover, a lot of emotion, a lot of great images from those games.
Well, there was in 2000, if I recall, a little known Baltimore swimmer. I'm from Baltimore originally, who placed fifth in one race and didn't really do much, but they became the all-time greatest Olympian, outpacing Mark Spitz. Yeah, he was there. I don't know if you happened to bump into him. Probably wouldn't have remembered him.
No, I didn't. I wish I'd have been able to focus on him. But yeah, definitely he was not a big name back then. But boy, later, incredible.
Yeah, really, really exploded after that. Now the 2000 election was pretty crazy. Of course, it was the end of Bill Clinton's time. We kind of, as a nation, stumbled through the 1990s, post Cold War, trying to find our way around. I don't think people strategically really know what was going on. At least it didn't seem that way, and no matter where they fell in the political spectrum. But we ran into an election in 2000, and it was Al Gore versus the Texas governor, and you covered that campaign. What was, for you, in that campaign, the most poignant moment that you recall?
I think, traveling around the country to really get the pulse of what people were thinking at the time. And there was a lot of division back then, nothing like it was like today. I think everyone thought it was going to be a close race, and no one ever thought it would come down to, counting Chads in Florida, and it was a very intense election all the way to the very end. And no one knew which way it's going to go for many, many weeks in terms of that decision that the Supreme Court made. And lucky for me, I didn't have to cover the recount. I was at home recovering just from the entire campaign itself. But I just remember, the campaigns are just like a traveling circus. You're hopping around from city to city, it's like Groundhog Day. You know, you're in and out
It's
of the
grueling.
airplane.
Yeah.
It's very, very grueling. Sometimes you don't even know what city you're in until you look down and you try to see signs. Where am I? You know, because it's a lot of travel, and a lot of become pretty close with the people that you're traveling with, and I was among the many dozens of journalists traveling on the campaign trail. We had our own plane actually. When you're not with the candidate itself, they would hire an extra plane that the press would travel in, and but it was a lot of work, a lot of hours, and when it was over, I was glad it was over because it's a lot of work.
I can imagine. So let's shift. I want to ask about another iconic moment. It was in that time frame or time period, I should say, before I give Todd a chance to remind folks what program we're listening to and what station we're on. We'll get to that in just a moment. But you were then with President Bush. Some of the early things happened. That was the No Child Left Behind. That was a big, a bunch of political discussion about that. A lot of press coverage of that with Kennedy and how that went through. And then they had the P3 Orion that was forced down over Hainan Island. That was huge, dramatic moments. I'm sure there's some incredible photo opportunities for you there as the president was going about that business. But then we get to 9/11, which startled the world. It actually, not just the intelligence establishment, not just the national security establishment, but the entire world. And of course, you were close to the president. You saw what was going on. 9/11. Obviously, we've discussed just briefly the moments in the classroom, but things must have picked up pretty hectic from that moment on when the president got back in the air and then eventually got back to Washington. And what was that experience like? I mean, it's got to be very hard to relate a once-in-a-lifetime experience like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was like I've covered like I mentioned early in my career, covering lots of things, but nothing. A day like 9/11 was just incredible in terms of just how many things happened so quickly. So you might remember after the classroom, when the president left during that motorcade ride, we learned that Flight 93 had been hijacked. We learned that the White House was being evacuated. The vice president was being evacuated to a secure location. We learned that the Capitol was being evacuated. We learned that the Pentagon had been hit. We also learned that the Flight 93 was headed to Washington, and that all happened just during that motorcade ride, literally 25 minute time span. So by the time we were on the airplane, I remember walking up the stairs, and Andy Card, the chief of staff, was standing at the top of the stairs telling everyone to remove their batteries from their cell phones. And that was the first time I thought to myself, wow, could we be a target? And so that was a very eerie moment, I remember, as we boarded the airplane. But it was very, very intense. And I remember my first few images aboard the airplane as we took off. I was photographing the president alone in his private cabin, literally having an argument with Andy Card because he really wanted to return to Washington. He was telling Andy, I'm the president, I'm going back to Washington. And Andy Card was trying to be very diplomatic. He was telling him it wasn't safe. And a few minutes later, all the talk aboard the airplane was where we're headed and where to keep the president safe. And I made an image of Andy Card huddling with the Secret Service, with the military aide, the guy who carries the football. Yep. And we finally learned that we were headed to Barksdale Air Force Base. And what I didn't know until later is that we literally were flying around in circles over the Gulf of Mexico. But they wanted to get the president, in the air, up high, which was another issue too, was the Air Force One was flying so high in altitude, they were losing a lot of the signal in terms of the communication, so that became a problem. And then we were hearing a lot of false reports, and the president himself called it, we're already hearing it was already like the fog of war was happening. We heard a false report that a car bomb had exploded in front of the State Department, which was false. We heard that a fast-moving object was headed towards the president's ranch, which is false. But then one of the most eerie, surreal moments was the president himself came out of the cabin of Air Force One, and he said, I just heard that Angel is the next target. And Angel is the code name for Air Force One. So that was a lot of, and this is all happening one after the other, all these moments. So it's very, 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 very intense.
Unfolding pretty quickly. I imagine the reason for such high altitude, without discussion what it was probably to be out of the range of high altitude ballistic missiles that we fired at it. Yeah, because you don't know what the threat is. So, I mean, that's probably just good prudence there. So before I get Todd to remind folks where we're at, I just want to ask you another question here very quickly. And this is as you know, as a photographer, look, I'm not going to sit here and pat myself on the back and think I'm a great photographer, but I do like to think I have a good eye for catching scenes, natural scenes, and also, you know, it always drives me nuts when people take pictures and they frame people right in the center. I like to frame people inside the environment. I think it makes for a better picture. But when as a photojournalist, are you looking for something when you're trying to catch a moment? Or, I mean, I'm sure you get lucky. We all get lucky with photographs, but what is it you're looking for? Are you looking to capture the sense of your I don't want to say target, but your the person you're capturing on camera, or the scene you're capturing on camera? Are you looking for things all the time? Is it something you learn, a skill you develop? Or I mean, it can't be like, okay, hey, look, I took a picture. Look, I'm working for the AP now.
Yeah, a lot of it, you know, for example, on 9/11, I was totally keyed in on the president's emotions. You know, I was trying to get every reaction from him. And I was like trying to put aside my emotions. You know, lucky for me, I had a camera to hide my emotions. And I was just literally focused on him and the moments that he had with his staff, moments alone with his own thoughts, you know, and waiting for those moments. And a lot of it, like you said, was luck in terms of timing. A lot of it is being in the right place at the right time. A lot of it's anticipation. And when aboard Air Force One, for example, it's so you're so intimate because you're so close to everyone that it's a really unique situation to be that close. For example, I remember when they were telling the president that it was not safe to return to Washington, and he was really upset. I mean, he's totally pissed that he couldn't get back to Washington. He knew that the enemy was watching. He wanted to lead from the Oval Office. He didn't want to look like he was on the run. And I remember they were telling him, and he looked away, and I'm literally standing like 2 feet from him. It felt like he was looking through me in terms of that moment, you know, just very, very intense. So yeah, you know, but emotion, you know, that's what I look for in pictures.
All right, that's pretty awesome. Thanks. Hey, so Todd, what are folks listening to?
Absolutely. Hey, folks, you're listening to the Common Sense Conservatives here on WSMN 1590 AM and 95.3 FM. We're live every Wednesday night, 7 to 9 Eastern, bringing you back to reality. I'm Tom McKinley here in Northeast Tennessee, joined by my co-host, Colonel Chris White in Central PA, and John Grosvenor holds down the studio there in Nashua, New Hampshire. We're joined by Eric Draper, who was the official White House photographer during President George W. Bush. That's number 43's time in office from the time he took office to the time he left. And of course, he's covered many other great events out there. And I want to ask one question about an event that you covered, the riots after the Rodney King decision. It was in 1992, I believe it was. You Seeing Through the Flames, the photo you won an award for. Tell us about the emotion of covering such an event like that in your hometown, and of course winning such an award.
Well, you know, it was a very unique story for me. You know, I was working for the Albuquerque Tribune, which is far from Los Angeles, far from you know, the area that I grew up in, South Central LA. But my photo editor had a suggestion. He said, you know what? What do you think about going home to tell the story, only the story that you can tell? You know, me returning home. So it was a first person story. I wrote the story. The images that I made focused on my family. It focused on friends. It focused on the church community where I grew up. So it's really a kind of a unique situation. Not only just the story itself, because it was a huge national story, but also a personal story that really hit home. You know, a lot of the areas that were affected, I grew up in. A lot of the buildings that burned, you know, I remember as a child. A lot of the people that were affected. I remember I had a very young nephew at the time who was arrested during that week. He got mixed up in the wrong crowd, you know, so there's a lot of personal things going on along with the story itself. So it was very, I was happy how it turned out, just to give that type of point of view of a story that was really unique to me.
Right, absolutely. And of course, whenever you first started out being a photographer, is either some of the things that you brought with you from doing something else, or is this kind of what you've learned along the way of how you tell your stories?
I think a lot of it's, you know, you learn along the way, but also you learn from the stories that you cover. Being a photojournalist, you do a lot of observing, a lot of you ask a lot of questions just to get more background on what you're covering, and that's one thing that was interesting for me, because as a news photographer, you're always trying to knock the door down to get the story. In the White House, the door is already open. Everything
Right.
was just was open. So that was something, an adjustment I had to make, because I would have to ask my questions later. I couldn't like stop the president and say, "Hey, what's going on?" It was very a different type of approach. But the fact that, for example, in the White House, I had so much access that I can just literally just wait and learn what's happening just by observing. For example, in the White House, I literally saw the president more than the first lady during those 8 years. To be with him almost at all times, and I was able to document him not only as a father, but as a commander in chief, as a son, because his dad was around, that Bush dynasty was happening, as a dog owner,
Right.
You guys might remember
Barney,
Barney.
Miss Beasley. Oh yeah,
He was a star back then.
He sniffed at me once or twice.
Oh yeah, I've been bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was so typically, the stories that I do, you really try to make people comfortable with your presence. And for example, in the White House, the president was very comfortable with me, and I was lucky. I was able to really have show a complete full circle of what the president and the presidency was all about.
Right. And one thing Secretary Card, he told whenever he visited different whammo elements or whatever, he talked about that first time walking into the Oval Office, and President Bush is sitting at the the Resolute desk, and he looks up and he says, "Mr. President," and he's talking to his dad, who calls him Mr. President, the first person to call him Mr. President in the Oval Office. And I believe you were there and took that photo. What was your emotions or feelings of during that time frame?
That was my first time in the Oval Office as well. And I remember, on Inauguration Day, this is after the parade, obviously after the swearing in ceremony, right. And the president wanted to get down to business right away. So he wanted to see the Oval Office, and I was actually learning where my office was. My office was in the basement of the West Wing.
Yeah, right.
My office was the old barbershop. They were like black and white photos of former presidents getting their hair cut there. I remember the phone rang, and they said, "Eric, you need to get to the Oval Office right away." But I didn't know where the Oval Office was. Literally.
Upstairs.
Yeah, I knew I had to go upstairs. So I grabbed my cameras. I go screaming through the halls, and they were kind of pointing me in the right direction. I end up in the Rose Garden, which is the best place, because that's the walkway from the Rose Garden through the colonnade to the Oval Office door, and I literally backpedaled backwards into the Oval Office, and made the picture of the president walking through the door for the first time.
That's so cool.
And then his father behind him, and he sits at the Oval Office desk, the famous Resolute desk, as you mentioned. And yeah, I'm already creating documenting history right off the bat. And if you guys ever see that photo again, there's always the story behind the story. There's a cord coming from the wall leading to the chair where the president was sitting, and it was a massage chair that was left there, and the president is turning it on at the time, which is leading to the laughter in that image, along with the proud father watching his son in the Oval Office for the first time. And that chair was gone the next morning. Yeah, they got rid of it.
Oh, of course. He brought his own chair in for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. John, did you have any questions you wanted to jump in on real quick here before we go back around the horn?
Well, I was sitting there thinking, talking because it's the anniversary date of 9/11, and you gotta realize, in your profession, you're chasing a U.S. president around, and you're going to different buildings, you're going to different facilities that you're not familiar with. Did you have somebody that lead you through these things, or were you just following an entourage? I mean, like 9/11, you're right there, ground zero. I'm assuming at the Twin Towers, and there's a lot of debris. So there must be chaos. And how was that experience for you? Did you just manage well, or was it just a matter of just sticking to the president?
Yeah. You literally, just follow the president. And there's always an entourage with the president. It could be large at times, or it can be very small. You have obviously the Secret Service agents. You have the president's doctor. You have the military aide. You have his personal aide. And then there's me with a camera, following him around. And a lot of it's is trying to anticipate. A lot of it is serendipity, just being lucky, being in the right place at the right time. To watch someone for 8 years is kind of a unique opportunity because it's not normal, first of all, but also literally I can walk into the room and listen to the president, and from the tone of his voice, know what kind of mood he was in. From his face, I can see his like micro expressions to know what not what he was thinking, but I can anticipate where to be, like if I needed to be out of the president's vision, if he was having a crappy day, then I knew, I knew I had my spots where to hide, but then I would also jump out when there was an opportunity to make a picture. But a lot of it was just experience of just being there every day. And people say I was a fly on the wall, but I was more like a piece of furniture in the room, because even if I wasn't there, the staff and the president make sure I would be there. Like if I wasn't there, they'd say, "Oh yeah, get Eric up here," and that's how comfortable they were with my presence.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, I was kind of thinking you need to keep a certain degree of inconspicuity where you can't be really up on them all the time. And figured the zoom lens was probably your friend in some regards.
A lot of times, yeah, definitely. I would pick my moments, and when there is a historic day like 9/11, I could be almost anywhere in the president's face, and everyone was so intense and focusing on their job that it didn't matter where it was, because everyone was focused on their job.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
as a truck driver, sometimes when I'm home working around the house, leaf blowing, mowing the lawn and stuff like that, because I've traveled so many different places, I'll have something pop into my head of someplace I was and what was happening. And I'm trying to figure out what was that, and I'm reeling back on that. Do you have that experience a lot when you're just doing something? All of a sudden you realize your mind's in some place where you've been and you're trying to recall all this?
Yeah. And a lot of times I have to go back to the photos to remember what happened. Like I never thought I'd be in a job that literally I would forget what I photographed, and I literally had to go back and recount what I did through images. And you realize how important photos are with history, with remembering things, with continuity, with it's really, really important. But yeah, a lot of people, like I traveled to 70 countries with President Bush during the 8 years. And in some countries I can't tell you if I was there or not. Typically you're in a hotel room looking out a window, or
Yeah.
in a motorcade. So it's a kind of a unique way to experience another country, and you're inside places that normal people don't get to see or witness. Like you're in a palace, like you're inside Buckingham Palace, in London, and very unique situations like that where no one, a lot of people don't get to experience. So yeah, it's definitely a pretty unique job.
So I'm kind of curious because I've read that you've taken over 1 million pictures just of President Bush alone. And I imagine you've taken a lot more in other regards. And then from my understanding, you do things like weddings and that as well on the side. I'm wondering just how many terabytes of data do you have, of pictures do you have in your computer? I'm assuming that's where you keep your library of pictures.
Yeah, and it's a mix, because I've had, early in my career, I have a lot of film that, not every image is scanned, but, I've never really added it up. That's a good question. I definitely have many terabytes of information.
I can imagine.
And I'm still trying to get all that, my own personal archive, situated safely in a situation that they're safe, and on a storage, on a RAID, backed up, things that I did at the White House. I'm trying to do to my own personal archive.
So you don't count on Google to back that up. They don't remind you that you don't have enough storage.
Yeah, put it all on cloud. That's a good spot.
Yeah.
So have
Yeah,
have you written a book or considered writing a book on your experiences? I mean, you've got pretty interesting experiences here, and you got a lot of pictures to back it up. And I assume because you're the one that took the pictures, you have rightful ownership to them. Have you taken that into consideration yet?
Well, I did do a book on my White House time. I did a book called Front Row Seat. It was published almost 10 years ago now, and it was on the 8 years of photos. And the book itself, when you think about 8 years of photos, I mean, it's a lot of kind of hard to think about. But through the 8 years, there are these themes that would rise, which made it pretty easy for me to develop the chapters in the book. For example, it's a coffee table book, about 150 photos. The University of Texas Press published the book. And I've got a chapter on 9/11. I have a chapter on family. I have a chapter on war president, because after 9/11, the president became a war president. I have a chapter called Life in the Bubble, all the quirky, strange things that can only happen in the White House. I have a chapter called The Beginning, obviously the early moments in the administration. The final chapter is called Sprint to the Finish, and it's actually a quote taken from President Bush himself, because people would always ask him, what are you going to do, at the end of the administration, or what, and he'd always say, I'm going to sprint to the finish. And that's what we did. Literally, it was a sprint, because everything, everything doesn't stop until the very end. But yeah, I'm very proud of that body of work. And if you're, it's available on Amazon, by the way, it's still there. Yeah, have a look.
Absolutely. So we're going to go back around the horn here. Get the Colonel back in.
And so, folks, if you do want to get his coffee table book, which is pretty incredible, it is available on Amazon, but make sure you put Front Row Seat Book Bush. Otherwise, you're going to get paperbacks, fiction, all kind. There's a bunch of things called front row seats. You got to make sure you get the right one. What the hell is this crap? He said there were pictures of Bush in here. This is about some beach house and a mailbox. And oh wait, wrong movie. Anyway, so I noticed that that you mentioned earlier, and I believe you are living back in the land of enchantment. You mentioned that you worked in Albuquerque. Myself have been there many times. Kirtland Air Force Base is there. Interesting state. Very, very interesting from a lot of standpoints. Native Americans, Navajos, Mescalero, Apache down there by White Sands. What brought you back to New Mexico? I mean, and you are in New Mexico, if I'm not mistaken. It is a beautiful place. I mean, if you can avoid the radiation from Trinity, you're pretty good. No.
Back when I was a newspaper photographer, I did work there for 3 years. Actually, as an Associated Press photographer as well. I was based there. It just became home. My wife, who was with me, she's a reporter, a writer. She enjoyed it. We loved the outdoors. We loved horses at the time. So it was a really easy decision to move back. And I always loved the West, because there's something about the West where you can see the horizon. I always felt kind of like fish out of water on the East Coast. So like when everything was over, I got out of DC pretty quickly. And as a matter of fact, the home that we had purchased like right before I got the White House job was still there. And so we moved back in, and it was an easy decision to make.
I could see that. I mean, Wyoming is constantly calling me. It's a place I love. It's similar in many respects to New Mexico and out that general direction. Yeah, no, I have to say that, look, I lived in LA as a kid briefly, so I can understand the appeal of where you're at over LA. But I mean, and beyond that, you did mention you grew up South Central. Is that where you didn't grow up in East LA? You grew up South Central. Yeah. I don't know that area of LA that well. I mean, most of what I know from LA these days is from watching Bosch, and that's the Hollywood division. So it's just not really, it's not my subject matter. But anyway, no, it is beautiful out there, and it's good to see you there. So these days, you're working as an independent photographer. You do it for corporations. You still do political stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing and where people can find you in case you're curious, other than finding your book on Amazon?
Yeah. A lot of people kind of look me up at my website. EricDraperPhotography.com is my website. By the way, there is another Eric Draper photographer who is a photographer in Utah. If you see any mountain biking or skateboarding photos, that's not me. Yeah, I do all kinds of work now for nonprofits, for think tanks, for campaigns. Like I was Mitt Romney's photographer. I did a lot of other campaigns. Yeah, I'm all over the place. You know, I really enjoy the diversity that I do now in terms of the work. You know, even like I was mentioned before, you know, destination weddings. So a lot of corporate work, corporate events, portraiture, and even some assignment work for magazines and newspapers. So I like the mixed bag. I still like traveling. So yeah, so it's been fun to be able to pick and choose who I work for and what I do.
No, I absolutely agree with you 100%. People ask me when I retire from the Army, are you going to work the war college? And I said, what, are you smoking crack cocaine? I just spent 36 years doing what people told me to do. This is my time, baby. My time. Yeah. Exactly. So I'm my own boss now and I love it. So you mentioned horses. Growing up on a farm, we had all kinds of different horses, but I was especially fond of Appaloosas. Do you have a favorite or what kind of horses do you guys have? And what's the thing that you like about them?
Well, now my wife was actually the horse person who she was a rider for many years as an adult. Since then, we've transitioned from horses to dogs. So we do a lot of dogs.
I thought you were going to say llamas there for a second.
No. Yeah, there are a lot of llamas in New Mexico, believe it or not. But yeah, so you know, it's just something, an activity that we do. You know, we had horses in DC. Something to get us out of the beltway, get our minds off of politics, and yeah, we just really enjoy. We still enjoy horses when we can, but yeah, now we're in a safer sport. You know, dogs, you can literally stand on the ground and not fall. So yeah.
They also when they bolt, you're not taking down the road for a ride at 30 miles an hour
exactly,
either.
Exactly. Yeah, and dogs are cheaper to own as well. So.
Oh yeah, trust me. That's why I don't have horses. Yeah. The tack and the furrier and the vet bills, they'll eat you alive. You got to be a rich man to have horses these days. They really are expensive. Yeah, but you got a lot of wild ones running out there: Colorado, Utah, some in New Mexico. The ones that are descendants from the ones that got away from the Spanish back in the day. So, Eric, what are you looking forward to going forward? Is anything big on the horizon you'd like to do? You've done an awful lot. It's an impressive CV. I mean, I'm always thinking about the next big thing. I ran for state legislature. That was a mistake. Now I'm broke.
You know, that's a very good question. You know, I don't have anything that a list really. I just kind of when these opportunities come up, you know, I say yes or no, and I'll go. You know, I'm always looking for a personal project, which like for example, I think my dogs are a project, you know, just to do something completely away from politics and away from, you know, disasters and news, you know. So, but yeah, nothing really big, really. I just really enjoy doing different types of photography and doing storytelling on any level. You know, it could be a wedding, it could be following a CEO around at a conference, you know, so I like to do it all.
Well, it sounds like you've achieved Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization. And that's pretty impressive. It's good to reach that stage of life. Congratulations. Yeah. So I'm going to hand it back to Todd as we wrap up here. But before we do, I want to thank you personally for sharing this evening with us. 9/11 is a date that is slipping from people's memory, unfortunately. I had to remind people today that was 9/11. Veterans, I shouldn't have to remind. Right. I was in the United States Embassy in Tunis, Tunisia, when this all went down. I was writing a report because I'd finished my time at the Staff College that day, and I was back in the embassy, the attaché's office, when the gunnery sergeant called me over. Gunny said, hey, Captain White, did you see this? And I said, what? And he had CNN on, and we're watching a reporter standing on a building there and looking over at the towers, and one of them smoking, and here comes a plane about 5 minutes later. So I'll never forget it. But thank you for sharing and bringing back those thoughts about 9/11, all the people we lost, the fortune, the trillions of dollars we spent since then, the blood that we've lost since then. It all is very important, and people should remember it. So I want to thank you personally, and I'll hand it back to Todd.
Yeah, absolutely. John, do you have a final question before we let Eric wrap it all up here?
No, I think I ran out of questions.
You ran out of questions pretty
except
quick.
for I'm kind of curious. I gotta ask because with the video I'm seeing here, it looks like you're in a container home. Is that what that is? Or
I was afraid you're going to ask. It is a container home.
That's his office.
I'm actually in Colorado. My wife and I are renting this container home cabin and looking out at this incredible mountain view near Aspen, and we have our dogs with us. So yeah, we're spending we're celebrating our 35th wedding anniversary out here.
Oh,
so
wow! Congratulations!
Yeah,
thank you.
Congratulations on that.
And he's spending time with us here on the Common Sense Conservatives. Holy cow!
that makes us kind of special, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's not hooked up to a tractor trailer or anything rumbling down the road. It's actually
no. It's very secure. Yeah. It's
no. The
you
container
can
homes are wicked. They're really nice how they've engineered them and stuff, putting them together, and the things they can do with them. They're awesome.
Absolutely.
That was my question, Todd. That was a big one. I know.
That is interesting.
Good observation.
I was looking at the room. So, Eric, any final thoughts? Anything maybe we didn't cover this hour? Things that maybe you've done in your life, career, whatever that people just don't know, or maybe they should know. Maybe you already talked about how you got your start, but what advice maybe you would give to some young person who's maybe coming out of high school or college, looking at maybe getting to something that you've done?
I think people should not be afraid to ask for what you want. And that's what I did. I saw an opportunity and I said, why not me? Why not? And I stepped up, and the worst thing that can happen is they say no. And then you try again later or try something similar. And so I think that's the main thing is that, a lot of young people are afraid to put themselves out there. And that's how you learn, when you put yourself out there and you take some chances. And so I think that's my biggest advice.
Yeah,
well, it went pretty well for Eric, I think. I mean, things worked out pretty well up until this week when he finds himself in Airbnb in a container designed for a cargo ship in Colorado. Folks, I've warned you about Airbnb. You were worried about the cameras they leave in the rooms to spy on you. You might wind up in a shipping container in Colorado. Look, Eric.
Wakes up in China.
I was just going to say that.
If you're in jeopardy, blink twice really fast right now.
He's good. He's safe.
I know it does look like a scene out of a movie or something, right? It's like you don't see my hands are tied, my feet are tied.
Yeah. No.
I'm just waiting for Schwarzenegger to walk and goes, I'll be back, So it looks like something.
But this has been a great interview, a great week. I really appreciate you being on the show. And last week we had Navy Bob on the show, which I'm sure you're very familiar with Navy Bob. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Bob is great. Miss him a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So, any final thoughts or any websites you may have that anybody could find you to maybe ask you to come to work for them?
My website. I'm definitely up for a lot of different things. To documenting stories, and my approach is storytelling. Allow me to tell your story. Let me know what you need. And EricDraperPhotography.com.
EricDraperPhotography.com. Definitely going
to not the mountain bikes, not the mountain bikes.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. No.
Yeah, so we should be getting played off here in just a second. We'll go to our commercial, and we'll be back at the top of the hour for the folks who are listening. How much time we got there, John? Probably about 30 seconds or less?
Probably about 15, yeah.
About 15 seconds. Yeah, Eric,
just again, 10 seconds, bro.
Thank you, sir, very much for being here. Really appreciate it. You're welcome back anytime, sir.
Thank you, Todd.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. So, folks,
thank you, John.
You're welcome, man. It was a pleasure to have you on this evening.
Absolutely, big time. So we'll be back, folks, after the commercial break here in just a few moments. Stick around. More Common Sense Conservatives coming up.
WSMN 1590, WSMN 95.3 FM Nashua. Listen, watch, and stream at wsmn.live.
ABC News, I'm Chuck Sievertson. Hurricane Francine's drenching the Gulf Coast from about Lafayette, Louisiana to New Orleans to Mobile, Alabama. Dangerous storm surge, flooding possible. It's slightly weaker, 90-mile-an-hour winds. Jason Bajaran, president of Terrebonne Parish, Louisiana.
This path is our worst-case scenario, and thankfully it's not as strong a storm as it could be. And so we're just really making sure, everybody inside the levee system should be okay. Maybe have a little bit of topping, but hopefully not much. And then not having any levels break, but we're keeping an eye on it on a steady basis.
North Korea fired several short-range ballistic missiles that landed in the East Sea, says South Korea's military. Rhode Island reporting its first case of Eastern equine encephalitis, a brain inflammation. At least 9 cases reported nationally. 3 major Southern California wildfires are growing, burning homes, cars, and horse stables. Some injuries reported, some in mountain communities. This is ABC News. Shipping costs could be going up. The U.S. Postal Service says it's ending discounts that companies like UPS and DHL get to use the service. The move is meant to help the post office slow losses, but it could mean consumers pay more. Already, FedEx is eliminating its FedEx Smart Post that utilize the postal network using its own trucks and contractors. More than 3 dozen attorneys general want to see a warning added to social media sites.
In the same way that research showed a link between smoking and lung cancer in the 1960s, U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy says that in 2024,
we do have growing evidence that tells us that social media use is associated with harms.
Especially, he says, to young people. 42 attorneys general have signed on to a letter urging Congress to slap a tobacco-style warning label on social media. Jim Ryan, ABC News.
France's counterterrorism prosecutor says authorities foiled 3 plots to attack the Olympic Games in Paris. Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
Hi, I'm Angie Hicks, co-founder of Angie. When you use Angie for your home projects, you know all your jobs will be done well. Roof repair? Done well. Kitchen sink install? Done well. Deck upgrades? Done well. Electrical upgrade? Done well. Angie's been connecting homeowners with skilled pros for nearly 30 years, so we know the difference between done and done well. Hire high-quality, certified pros at Angie.com.
Mom, meet Sarah.
From first-time Nana moments.
Yeah, welcome to Flight 101.
To annual girls trip moments. Your can't miss moments are worth protecting against RSV. If you're 75 or older or 60 plus with a chronic condition like asthma, COPD, heart disease, or severe diabetes, you're at higher risk of landing in the hospital from RSV. And there are no prescription RSV treatments. Check eligibility and schedule your RSV vaccine at vaxassist.com.
So where should we go next?
Sponsored by Pfizer.
Continuing the legacy started in 1904, Roger Pellerin of Gate City Monument Incorporated continues to provide the same high-quality monument, custom headstone, and stoneworking craftsmanship today that they built their reputation on over 100 years ago. Servicing Nashua, New Hampshire, as well as nearby areas in Massachusetts, such as Lowell, Billerica, Chelmsford, and beyond. From creating custom monuments to memorialize, to landscaping and granite work or restorative services, each job is done to your satisfaction and is backed by decades of experience and integrity. If you're thinking about stonework, think Roger Pellerin of Gate City Monument. Visit online at gatecitymonument.com. Stop by and meet Roger at 321 West Hollis Street in Nashua, or call 603-883-7141. That's 603-883-7141. Gate City Monument, memorials of distinction for people who care.
The views. Hey, folks, welcome back to the Common Sense Conservatives right here on WSN 1590 AM and 95.3 FM. Had Eric Draper on the first hour, in case you missed it. But Eric Draper was the chief White House photographer during the President Bush, George W. Bush, a.k.a. 43's term in office, or 2 terms in office, if you will. So all 8 years, he stayed there right alongside President George W. Bush and got a lot of great photos from 9/11. Obviously, today is 9/11, 2001. And we just here at the Common Sense Conservatives certainly remember those who fell during 9/11, of course, in the subsequent wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the war on terror in general. And at the same time, we remember all the first responders, the police, fire, EMS who gave their lives there, in New York, and those who went into the Pentagon to help try to save people there. And of course, those who responded in Pennsylvania, which obviously we lost everybody on Flight 93, but they responded there just the same. So we really, truly appreciate that. Remember, every day, and especially today on 9/11, the anniversary, 2001, 23 years later. And we'll go around the horn here before we jump back into the politics of everything. Kind of maybe give a thought on 9/11 if we could before we talk about last night's debate there. And I'll start with the Colonel on that one.
Well, before we go with that, if you live in the central Pennsylvania area, bad news. I just bought the last copy of Eric's book that's in the warehouse here at Amazon.
Oh, really? You did?
Yeah, I just did. So during the break, so you can't let me away from the camera for a minute. I just get in trouble.
Holy cow. Only one left in stock. Hold on, let me refresh mine.
Now, I suspect that's locally here, but I mean, there might be more in your warehouse around the country. Are you checking to see if it's in yours?
I think it may. I think you may have gotten the last one.
I would suggest checking Barnes and Nobles and other book providers.
Barnes and Noble, hiss boo, leftist. No,
I can't help that part.
Also, they charge the prices at full fare. At least even with that taxes, you should come out ahead of Amazon. Not as good as the warehouse clothes, but anyway, 9/11. What an unbelievable day that was. At that point, I had been in the Army for nearly 2 decades. I was enlisted, then went back to college and spent 2 years in the Guard, came back in 1989. And at that stage was a captain when 9/11 happened and promoted to major, like right after that, like the next month, I think I became a major, something like that. Yeah, it was, wow. It's not unimaginable. And I say that because people think at the time it was unimaginable, but intelligence analysts had made, projections that something like this could happen, and everyone claimed it never could. Look, people went. I want to say something about this as a 3-decade plus professional intelligence officer. I can tell you that pretty much any scenario, including aliens landing here, and picking your brains, like Mars attacks. Pretty much every scenario has been game played by war planners and intelligence professionals. Have talked about these things. They've made things. They've been also watching things. They've predicted things. This actual scenario in which people would try to fly aircraft into government buildings like the White House or into the Capitol building or the Pentagon have been discussed. In fact, there was even a Hollywood movie that was similar to this. That was the one with Steven Seagal, Executive Decision. Yeah. Kurt Russell and Steven Seagal, in which the terrorists intended to fly the plane.
Yeah, greatest Steven Seagal movie because he was killed nearly instantly. So that's
great. He was out of the movie in 5 minutes. I was like, what? He's gone? Now we can focus on the movie. No, but exactly. No, but instead of watching his poor acting. No, but I say that, but he's had a couple of good movies. Anyway, but Steven Seagal. So look, when people tell you about intelligence failures, don't buy that. For instance, intelligence failures when it comes to Gaza on October 7th last year. No, there were officials in the military hierarchy, in the political hierarchy, who were warned about the hazards, the dangers, the vulnerabilities of the system they had set up, and they were also warned that Hamas had something planned. So 9/11, in my view, was not intelligence failure so much as it was a policy failure, and it was a policy fail of epic proportions. Politicians were unwilling to consider just how bad. It's like, go back to Hitler. I mean, Chamberlain didn't think Hitler was a serious threat. Right. That's why he capitulated, when he went to Munich and said, peace in our time. Really? Peace in our time lasted a year. It wasn't very long. Politicians oftentimes, remember, these aren't always the smartest people in the room. They just happen to be the ones that are the most telegenic, or the ones who convince people, or dynamic, charismatic enough to get people to believe them and follow them. Doesn't mean they're smart. Doesn't mean they surround themselves with smart people. The difference is that oftentimes they get the right information and they make the wrong decision. And in 9/11, we had indications of things for a long time, and not enough was done. It wasn't taken seriously. I, as a counterintelligence agent, risk being sanctioned if I shared information about terrorists gathered overseas with the FBI, because the Department of Justice prohibited us from doing that. They put a policy in place we couldn't share that information. I don't know why. And the Clinton administration famously wanted to treat terrorists as criminal acts when it's an act of war.
Right.
That's what it is. And because it wasn't considered an act of war, the military was not involved in it. And I'm not saying that's why things happen. My point here is that we went through something as a world, not just as the United States, just not just a nation, a world that no one should ever go through. But we've repeated it over and over again, just not on the same scale. Right. Look what happened to the cities in Iraq at the hands of ISIS. the slaughter, the enslavement, the rapes, the butchery, the destruction of a group of Christians who had been there for millennia. It's sad. It just goes on. And we're seeing it again around the world today. The world's an evil place full of evil people, and this is why we need people in uniform who are right, moral, and courageous, and who are willing to stand up for what's right, moral, and just each and every time, and not tolerate nonsense, and who are not corrupt. Those are the people we need. We need those people, whether it's in law enforcement or it's in uniform, because our politicians, let's just be honest, they backslide all the time, no matter who they are. Anyway, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, definitely good people need good people involved. Not the woke nonsense that we've seen in the past few years, past several years at least. But good people that are willing to serve, people that are serious and understand, the nature of the beast, if you will, nature of the situation, and are ready and willing to serve in combat and do what needs to be done. And that may mean giving up their own life too, for sure. John, what are your thoughts? Where were you on 9/11? Or if you want to just skip it, by all means, we can certainly do that.
No, I was in Acton, Massachusetts, out unloading a trailer into the back of a store, and somebody came out and said, "Holy crap! The towers just got attacked. Planes flew in towers. It was a terrorist attack, man. We're going to war." And I'm looking at them going, "Dude, we never go to war over this stuff. Nothing's going to happen." Well, yeah, it was bad. We went to war. One of the most amazing things about it is the courage of firefighters to run into a building that's on fire and ready to collapse. And they didn't know what they were getting into. They were just doing what they were trained to do. And it's a courageous thing. And people took notice of it, because law enforcement stepped up, firefighters stepped up. And it was once again cool to wear a policeman's uniform. They were respected once again. And it amazes me because post 9/11, how quickly when BLM come around, Congress forgot that.
Oh, quickly, yeah.
Lawmakers forgot that. They forgot that what policemen really do in our communities, what they do for our communities.
Right.
And they let that slide. They forgot all about that until J6.
Of course.
And all of a sudden, oh yeah, policemen are cool again. It's like, Chris had a point, about policy failures. He had a point about the mindset of our members of Congress, whether we're talking about local, state, or federal. They really need to get their mind out of their hindsight and start thinking again.
It's always about
start
the next
looking at things in a logical manner, rational.
Yeah, it shouldn't be just about the next election. It should be about the next generation of people. Whether that means you get unelected at some point, it doesn't matter. As long as you've done the right thing to help set up that next generation for success, that should be the right idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what it's supposed to be about. We're supposed to progressively becoming better as a nation when the left keeps talking about, making it better, but doing just the opposite. Right. Failed policies all over again. It's incredible. They just don't know what they're doing. He's right. We don't elect the greatest minds into office. And I think the greatest minds in office look at that mess and go, oh no, you're not trapping me into that.
No,
but
I gave it a try. It didn't work out.
Oh, well, one of the greatest minds actually was willing to sacrifice himself. But no, you're right, Chris. It didn't work out. I'm looking at this election here yesterday, this primary, and I don't know.
People vote against their best interest.
Right. Name recognition. I've heard her name
popularity
many times.
Contest.
Well, and that's exactly what happened in my race. It was a popularity contest, and it came down because the vote was split 5 ways. It came down to the school district where I'm at, and the guy that won the race is the history teacher that's been teaching kids for 20 years there.
Yeah.
So
I'm hearing from people that said, "Hey, man, I'm there at the polls. I'm getting ready to vote," and I hear people online going, I really don't know who to vote for. Who do you think I should vote for?
How in the world?
Why are you in line? Get out of line. Go on.
You shouldn't be here if you don't know. It's just crazy. It's just crazy. No, but the one thing that very poignant for me that I'll never forget, and the feeling of helplessness, and I can only imagine what it was like for people on the ground, particularly for firefighters and for first responders, but also for people who are trying to help. When those buildings were on fire, I knew that everyone above that collapsed plane, or that where the planes hit the building, were doomed. There was no way they were ever getting out of there.
Right.
And almost none of those people got out of either. Only a handful of people got out of one of the towers, if I'm not mistaken. And realizing that whoever's there, those are lives. They're mothers, fathers, daughters, sons, aunts, uncles, children, and they're doomed. And some of them bodies sadly were vaporized and never recovered. It's pretty horrific, and that's the feeling I remember watching that unfold real time as that second plane went into the building. I'm like, oh my gosh, those people are doomed.
But they were the lucky ones, I think, because they were the ones that we had the video footage of, reliving gore here or something so horrific. Watching people who were jumping to escape the flames.
Oh, that was terrific. Yeah.
And they actually was traveling, chasing them with the camera as they were falling. It was, man, it's just, I think about these things every year. We have an anniversary date. Every year I feel almost the same way I felt the day that happened. And the day it happened, I was like you guys, man, I was thinking, man, I just need to go put on a pack and go over there now. I couldn't at the time, but I was thinking it felt like, you just felt you wanted to fight. That's what you want. You want to go fight.
Oh, it definitely made a lot of people angry and ready for vengeance. And I would argue that we didn't really actually in the end didn't seek vengeance and didn't apply vengeance, but a lot of people wanted vengeance. But the people jumping out of the building and can you imagine the horror? That's what you accepted for your fate rather than what was coming there. It reminded me of the people who dove into the rivers in Hiroshima after the explosion. To certain death because the rivers were on fire, but they were burning because of the radiation. And that was, anyway, it's life should not be like this, ladies and gentlemen.
No,
it's not be like this. And this
not
is what
a civilized
happens.
Society.
Not even an uncivilized society. It shouldn't be this horrific. People never should have to live in fear. People should never have to deal with these horrible situations. But unfortunately, there are people, a percentage of Homo sapiens who are just evil. And this is what they do. Yeah. I mean, I saw a video today in France of illegal immigrants in broad daylight on a train platform, robbing a mentally challenged Frenchman, teenager, and everyone just stands there and watches it. Nobody intervenes. I'm gonna tell you what, had I been there, he'd have been kneecapped. I'll tell you that right now.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been the last time he tried that crap.
Well, think about the people that were trying to terrorize the train, and it took Air Force veterans, I believe, or personnel to actually stop them. Several years ago on the train in France, I can't remember the exact date.
U.S. personnel. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, exactly. But let's shift gears real quick and talk about last night's great debate that they had last night. Now, I don't know how many times the moderators fact checked. Maybe it was like 5 times or more. They fact checked Donald Trump, but never fact check Kamala Harris. And now I'm looking at several different videos of fact checks of Kamala Harris and people that fact checked Donald Trump. There was more inconsistencies with Kamala's, statements and the things that she said than there were actually with Donald Trump's. And these are some middle of the road fact checkers.
First off, Todd, they weren't fact checking. They were arrogantly and disrespectfully, rudely interjecting their uninformed opinions. Like when he said, "Well, President Trump, for 3.5 years you denied that you lost the election, but now it seems like you're admitting it." Just the other day, I watched you say how you lost, and Trump said, "I was being sarcastic." "Oh, I didn't send sarcasm." "Well, we didn't ask you for your opinion, butt wipe. Be quiet."
Right. Yeah. Lost by a whisker, or whatever it was.
Yeah, that's what he said. It was obvious sarcasm.
It's obvious sarcasm. Yeah. No, it's I think Victor Davis Hanson said it very well. They shame themselves worse than anyone since Candy Crowley, who just disappeared because of her horrific CNN moderator job she did several years back. She's a nobody now. And that's because of that. And maybe these two clowns, especially the woman, boy, she was nasty and venomous whenever she spoke. Very rude and condescending to Donald Trump. She did ask Kamala Harris a hard question, but it's probably because she was forced to. But no, it was just, I think last night, as I said, the needle didn't move. It still comes down to battleground states. Before the debate, I did my electoral map, and I was generous in handing Arizona and Pennsylvania to Kamala Harris. She still loses the election.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting on that one. But look, how close is Trump there in PA? I know that it's very, very close right now. The numbers could go either way.
If we believe the polls, everything's within 2 points in all the battleground states. Most of them in Trump's favor.
It's supposed to be a very close race.
Right.
But remember, in 2016, Donald Trump was behind 4 to 6 points all over the country in these states to Hillary Clinton. And why did he win? Well, he won for the same reason he's probably going to win this year. And that's because the uncounted vote. What I mean by the uncounted vote is people who lie to pollsters or people who are not considered by pollsters who say they're going to vote for someone else and then vote for Donald Trump. or don't say they're going to vote for. A lot of Republicans don't like Trump, but they're going to vote for him. They're not going to take the risk of having Kamala Harris there. Independents don't like Trump. They're going to vote for him, but they're not going to tell their friends and neighbors. So if you talk to your friends and neighbors in the coffee shop, oh yeah, Trump, yeah, he's a jerk. I'll never vote for him. And then son of a gun, look at that, Trump won locally. That's I think that she's at a big disadvantage right now, even if he is ahead in the polls or she's ahead in the polls by 2 points. I think she's at a disadvantage because the hidden Trump vote is going to be 3 to 5%. And if he pulls it, even a portion of the JFK vote, she's toast.
Yep, I would agree. So yeah, so sitting there last night, what were some thoughts that maybe went through your mind as you were watching this debate? Did you think it was 1-on-1, 2-on-1, 3-on-1, or entire ABC against Donald Trump?
Well, like Megyn Kelly and Victor Davis Hanson, I thought it was 3-on-1. But I mean, look, okay, so Trump underperformed. A lot of people rah Trump. He did knock it out of the park. He kept harping on illegal immigration. We got the point. Move on, Bubba. I was getting irritated with it, and I'm voting for the guy. She did what she had to do. She didn't collapse and start her word salad until the last 20 minutes. But the whole thing was stacked. 16 minutes on abortion. And this is where Trump failed to knock it out of the park. If I had been Trump, and frankly, I don't know if he doesn't listen to his advisors or they're just useless, but this is what I would have said. Abortion's going to come up. This is how you deal with it, President Trump. Hey, I don't know why we're talking about this issue. Why are you bringing it up? Well, because people say you're going to ban abortion. That's outside my purview as the president. I can sign executive orders. I can only sign legislation that comes in front of me. The Supreme Court has already determined that the 10th Amendment applies. This is a power that the federal government doesn't have. Therefore, the Dobbs decision returned this to the states. And therefore, it's a moot point. I have no control over abortion. The federal government only abortion the federal government has any regulation over is in government facilities and with the military. That's it. So we have nothing to say about it. Now, I'm going much deeper than he would have gone, but basically, it's the decision was unconstitutional. It's been sorted out. It's sent back down to the states. And oh, by the way, Kamala Harris is lying. There isn't a single state in the union where abortion is illegal. There isn't a single state in the union where a poor woman who can't afford a flight boards a plane and flies to another state to get an abortion. That's a lie. That's a misnomer. Now, there are states where women who wait 6 months to get an abortion have to go somewhere else to get an abortion in another state because states have restricted who can get an abortion and when to get an abortion. But abortion is legal in all 50 states and territories. So I don't know why you're asking me about this. It's not something I'm not even going to address as president. Who is briefing Trump? They're idiots. Everything I said is just factual. There's no ambiguity in what I just said. But no, that's not what we got for Trump. He goes back into illegal aliens. So she did what she had to do. But the moderators, they were atrocious. They were arrogant. They were snippy. They were condescending. And kind of what you expected. But Trump was, it was like playing T-ball. I'm like, oh, here it comes. Oh, man, how'd you miss it? It's right there in front of you. Anyway.
So. Did Trump look sleep deprived to you? Did he look like he was not his normal self last night?
He looked a little tired. I think in the eyes he looked a little tired. Of course, he is a little older, but he didn't look run down like, let's say, Joe Biden would or did.
Yeah,
no. I'm not saying he was weak. I'm just saying like
I don't think that's what it was. I think it was
seemed a little out of sorts to me.
He was out of sorts, and I think it was either he took her too lightly, or he was poorly prepped, or he was prepped well and ignored the people who prepped him.
All right.
He was prepping. I know that. I really think he's fed up with the lies. I think he's tired of being repetitively defending himself against these lies. And let's face it, Kamala Harris lied from beginning to the very end. Everything come out of that woman's mouth was a sticking lie.
He's filed for bankruptcy 6 times. No, he hasn't. Donald John Trump has never filed for personal bankruptcy in his life. That's a lie.
Right.
He has been involved in businesses that have filed for bankruptcy, and most of them have been reorganized and came back bigger than they ever were before. So, it's just dishonest. Oh, he's a convicted criminal. No, we know that you weaponized justice. And, she tried. The one thing she tried to do, and it fell flat, was, the only person on the stage that's prosecuted illegal aliens. People are wetting themselves laughing all over the country listening to that.
Yeah, right. Well, when are you going to prosecute the people that have killed countless Americans out there? Many that are very famous or infamous, I should say. People on college campuses in Georgia, people just sitting outside in California, people that have been deported multiple times, people that are criminal, illegal aliens, people that are felons in their own country and in this country. You failed to prosecute them, and you're not going to do anything about that. But
but he just kept going back to that well, and with no substance to it. And the Springfield thing was frankly a little bit embarrassing. He shouldn't have brought up Springfield, but the most hilarious and comical and ludicrous statement of the night occurred at about 1 hour and 10 minutes into it, when she said, "It's a well-known fact that Donald Trump is weak on national security." I fell out of my chair. What? A well-known fact. Hey, listen, Sonny Jim, this isn't the Gettys, the Rothschilds, and Colonel Sanders before he went teats up at the Meadows. Mike Myers, So I Married an Axe Murderer. It's a well-known fact, Sonny Jim. No, it's not a well-known fact that Donald Trump is weak on national security. It's a well-known fact that you have no idea what national security is, and your demented lunatic cadaver stumbling around 40% of his time in office on vacation, which exceeds Barack Obama, not by a lot, but exceeds Barack Obama. Unbelievable. And then the one time George Bush goes down and cuts wood, oh my gosh, he's on vacation when he's got a whole array of communications and people around him in Crawford, Texas. He wasn't taking a vacation. But this guy here, oh my goodness, every time you turn around, they freaked out when Trump went golfing once every 3 months. But this guy here, he's never been at work, and even when he is at work, he wasn't. The guy, he takes, they do the call at like 10 a.m. and it's not till the next day. No, there's this debate. I wrote it down as it went along, things that weren't discussed. First off, she said, I have a plan several times. You know what her plan is? Her plan is to give, without any vetting, $50,000 tax credit. In other words, your money, my money, to small businesses. Now, why should we give money to small businesses? How about small businesses borrow money from banks or lenders or people who invest with bonds or do it the way it's been done all along? Why should you and I assume the risk when these businesses have no proven track record? That is not fair to shift it to the taxpayer, because we know that 9 out of 10 businesses fail in the first 12 months.
And we have the Small Business Administration there to assist small businesses and help them to be successful, and people don't utilize those resources.
Correct. So we already spend money on small businesses, some of which is already inappropriate. And then the other thing is, she says, I'm going to give families a $6,000 tax break when they have children. No, you're not. You're going to give them a credit. So most Americans, newsflash folks, most Americans, a family of 4, $50,000 years of income, pay nothing in federal income tax. Nothing, not 1 cent. That's a statement of fact. Look it up. Go to the IRS tax tables, do the deductions, do the standard deduction, add it up, and see how much people pay in federal tax. Virtually nothing, because they get earned income credit, yada, yada, yada. They get this, not earned income credit. They get child tax credit. She wants to give $6,000 of tax credit, which means if you have no tax owed, you get that money from the taxpayer, just like earned income credit. So if you pay nothing in federal tax, you're going to get $6,000 because you knocked out a kid. And I'm paying for that. You're paying for that. You're paying. That is not right. That's not a plan. That's socialism. That's the destruction of America. That is continue. We need to move away from the past. That is a return to the past. That is the policy.
Yeah, that's generational welfare you're talking about.
Exactly. And people, handouts expecting it. So she kept saying, I have a plan. It was pretty clear themes. She wanted to make sure that, because that's the one criticism that's genuine. Still nothing on the website for Harris and Waltz showing us their plan. We've heard dabbling about we're going to stop corporations from gouging you. We're going to put regulations in place so corporations can't cheat you. That's utter nonsense. That's, they have no basis. We're not at war. There's no martial law. They have no basis for doing that sort of thing. It'll be struck down by courts. It's not legal. And but it's clear that she wanted to get the message across that, hey, I have a plan. We actually have a plan, when she doesn't. And then she claimed Trump doesn't have a plan. Well, Trump has a plan. If you go to his website, you just actually got to read. So, but here are the topics that were never discussed, were not fully explored in any way whatsoever, that are germane and the people want to know about. Number 1, taxes. No discussion of taxes other than that generalization. And by the way, she never mentioned how she wants to raise the capital gains tax from 20% to 48%. Oh, no, I'm only going to raise it to 28%, only for billionaires. Yeah, while they sell all their stock and cause my 401k, my retirement plan, my TSP plan to nosedive because the value of stock goes down because they dumped it so they wouldn't get taxed on their holdings. Are you serious? So the taxes never. The First Amendment. This is one of the biggest fascists on the planet who wants to censor speech. And the administration she's part of is a criminal rogue regime which has colluded, cajoled, and coerced tech companies to silence Americans in violation of the First Amendment. No discussion of the First Amendment. Not one question from these useless fake reporters and moderators. How about Trump briefly touched on this, but then he got off track again. Selected, not elected. He did mention 14 million people, but it was 14.5 million people. And he should have. That's the phrase. There's your money. Donald Trump, there's the money, baby. Show me the money. Selected, not elected. Democracy stolen. And this is what I would have said if I was Trump. Listen, she's talking about me being a threat. For the whole year, the Democrats have tried to frighten Americans. She's talking about let's build to be together. All they've done is told people what a threat I am to democracy. I was president. democracies here. We had free speech. We had freedom of assembly, freedom of religion. That all disappeared under this regime that she's part of. She was not elected. I was elected by Republican voters in 50 states and 4 territories in a democratic process. She got 0 votes in the primary. She was selected, not elected. That was never, who is briefing him? Selected, not elected should have been the phrase. That should be an ad today, selected, not elected. These people that run his campaign are idiots, complete idiots. Then what's a couple of ones here? So Afghanistan. All right. Afghanistan was mentioned, and Trump tried to talk about it, but he was lost and confused. And it's kind of like when he was talking about the governor of Virginia, and he was talking about the governor of West Virginia, and because he was confused. We're talking about the previous governor of Virginia who glorified killing babies after they're born. Also, when they fact-checked Trump, they were just arrogant and smug. For the record, there's not a single state in America that allows children to be executed after they've been born. That's not what Donald Trump said. He said if they had their way, they want the baby to be killed. And in fact, the former governor of Virginia said that's what we're going to put in place. So that's what Democrats want. But they said as if he actually made the claim, and he looked silly with people who weren't paying attention. No mention of the deficit. $2 trillion deficit in 2025 by this administration with her as part of it. That's larger than the entire federal budget was in the year 2000. Not a single mention of the deficit. This is unbelievable what wasn't mentioned here. What else have I got down here? Border czar. That was briefly mentioned, but she was never held to account. They gave her a free pass. She got like a 30-second answer on it.
Trump brought it up. That was it.
He tried to bring it up, but they raised it. I mean, the smug female raised the question and asked it of her, but she gave a 30-second response and never answered the question, and then went on and blathered on about, like she typically does, about something unrelated. And she never said, yeah, okay, but Madam Vice President, you haven't answered the question. Never did that. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 apropos topics that should have been discussed in this debate that were not even raised. Afghanistan was raised and the borders are, but only in a cursory fashion. Look, the fix was in, but it was always going to be in. Donald Trump should have known that. His team should have known that. And he should have been ready for when she screwed up. And she screwed up repeatedly. And he only once or twice hit it out of the park on her. All in all, very disappointing performance by Donald Trump. But again, people are going to vote for Trump, Last night, here's the biggest thing. Even though she held her own, arguably, she didn't move anybody.
No.
A lot of people were undecided. Actually, she lost last night because they weren't impressed by her. They know what they're getting with Trump. No matter what the press says, they know who Trump is. He's a loudmouth. He's arrogant. He's impolite. He's impolitic. But hey, he leads and America succeeds. Oh, there you go. There's the Trump's logo. Trump leads, America succeeds. Damn it, I should be on the Trump team. Give me a call, boys.
Right? Well, yeah.
Selected, not elected.
Good one.
Selected, not elected. Trump leads, America succeeds. I'm just gold tonight. It's like the solid gold dancers are coming on stage. Marilyn McCoo.
Shawnee wants to know what Harris was saying about Trump and the Taliban. Do you recall that, Chris? She brought up that Trump and his exit strategy to leave Afghanistan was to negotiate with the Taliban and leave them in charge and so on and so forth, which Biden actually did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the whole thing got botched because people aren't read in on what the agreement was. Right. When the Trump administration reached an agreement, they didn't hail it. It wasn't a big thing. Nobody's paying attention because it was Trump. And most people don't know what the details were. But Trump also screwed something too. And I wish he wouldn't do this, but I get why he does it because most people really don't know. We did not leave behind our military equipment. Congress purchased and gave $100 billion worth of weapons and hardware to the government of Afghanistan. It wasn't ours to take. If we'd taken it, we would have been stealing it.
Right.
So that has nothing to do with it. What Trump should have said is the following. Again, this is what would have knocked it out of the park. I reached an agreement with the Taliban because the Taliban was attacking our troops. And I threatened them if they continued, they're going to be turned into glass. And I showed them photographs of their homes, pictures of their wives and kids. After they finished wetting and soiling themselves, they stopped attacking Americans. That was the agreement. We reached an agreement with the government of Afghanistan, which you just lied about and said they weren't involved. They were involved, but they had to reach certain thresholds. They had to achieve this before we would withdraw completely. In the meantime, we ended combat operations. We only had troops there for security training of the Afghan forces, which made them credible, and the Taliban would not attack the government in a serious fashion while there were 10,000 U.S. military trainers on the ground for fear that they might strike them. The only combat force on the ground were a special reaction force to protect our troops. The timeline was set, the plan was in place, the milestones and thresholds were in place. Your administration, for a photo op, speaking of Eric, a photo op, announced that on September 11th, we'd be out of the country. Why September 11th? Talk about arrogance and disregard and disrespect for the people who gave their lives on September 11th. That's what you did. But there it is right there. But he's just going on about, we left the equipment behind. That is not what happened. So anyway, but he didn't have to give that detailed. All he had to say is what I said there in the end. We had an agreement. There were milestones in place. Your administration violated the milestones and abandoned them and then withdrew with no reasonable plan in place. People died. Biden lied and people died. And Harris was part of it. Remember, Kamala, you're proud to tell people you're the last person in the room that made those decisions that led to the death of 13 Americans. 13 Americans whose funeral you didn't show up for. 13 Americans who you didn't have the respect to show up at Dover Air Force Base for the respectful return of remains. You remember when Joe Biden kept looking at his wristwatch. I mean, seriously, who wears a wristwatch in 2021? Who? Nobody wears a wristwatch.
Joe Biden does, apparently.
My goodness, everybody's got a smartphone or a fitness app. Anyway, maybe it's an Apple Watch.
Oh, was that your second half of the slogan? So if Trump leads, America succeeds. Biden
Yeah,
lied,
Trump-
everybody died.
There you go. There you go. And then don't forget, selected, not elected. By the way, greetings and a shout out to Amy Justine LaRue, a lovely young lady who's on the program, who's went through some heck and back a couple years ago. Welcome, Amy. Good to see you here. Biden lied. People died. Trump leads. America succeeds. Selected, not elected. Look, I work for a minimal fee. I just want a job in administration, Secretary of Defense, but I prefer Secretary of State, and that'd be good.
Speaking of, while Biden's at the beach and Harris isn't doing anything presidential, wouldn't even meet Netanyahu when he come to visit the United States. Blinken's over there in Kyiv right now taking care of business. So now we know who's running the country at this particular moment in time.
I don't know if Blinken's taking care of much business, but he is.
But I'm saying Blinken's about the only one doing a job, whatever that may be. It got brought up last night. I think Kamala thought she zingered Trump, but he had said Biden's at the beach. Nobody's running this country. Who's actually the president? And Harris says, well, somebody needs to remind Mr. Trump that he's debating me, not Biden. She didn't say quite like that. And she thought she was giving him a zinger. And I think he's just looking at her like, did you not just get this?
Here's another one that Trump didn't get, John. He did knock it out. So this question was very obvious. It was very, very unfair. So they said, President Trump, and I will give that. They called him President Trump the whole night. That was pretty good. And even Kamala Harris called him President Trump many times. And then she also said former. So that was fine. But President Trump, you recently chose to talk about the vice president. You questioned her ethnicity and her race. Do you regret doing that? Now, this is what he should have said. Why are we talking about this? And when their jaws dropped and they said, well, because you said it. No, that's not what happened. I was invited to the Black Journalist Convention in Chicago. And so was the vice president. She chose not to go. I went to a place that was a hostile environment. And they raised the question. They brought the issue up. They said to me, well, is she black or Indian? I said, I don't know. I don't know. One time she's black, one time she's Indian. That's up to her. I don't care. This isn't germane. Why are you bringing this up in the debate? I don't care. She could be who she wants to be. This is America. You can be who you want to be. Boom, knocked it out of the park. But no. He stumbled through that whole nonsense.
Well, he basically said he didn't care. He did say that. He doesn't really care what race she is or claims to be. Honestly, it doesn't matter.
John, this is theater, man. This is Hollywood. That's what is.
That's the issue last night. Trump is getting fed up with it. He's not an actor. He's a straightforward shooter, and he's getting tired of the game.
Oh, he's an actor. I watched you. You're fired. Who's the boss? What's that stupid show he used to do? The Apprentice. The Apprentice. He's an actor. No. You've got, this was a made for television moment. Why are we talking about this? I'm here to talk about policy, not about her ethnicity. I don't care what ethnicity is. That's her business, not mine. Why should I care?
Or you could just straightforward answer that. It's up to her. She's the one that keeps changing the race.
He did say that, but it didn't hit the way my response would have hit.
Well, I'm sorry. He didn't respond the way you wanted.
Well, he would be knocking it out of the park tonight to be like Trump won. Even with the fake media would have to admit Trump won if he got those 4 points that I just said.
At the moment, he's actually debating whether he wants to do a second debate with Kamala.
He should do it.
I think it's a mistake not to do it. He's got to go back and just crush her in the second debate.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
and this could be like a Reagan Carter debate where he didn't fare too well in the first debate, and he comes back in the second one. Or that maybe it was in '84. I think it was '84. Yeah, it was in '84. The re-election debate. Yeah, he comes back.
He needs to start learning to make the stipulations. Okay, everybody else has made the stipulations on these debates, and he needs an unbiased moderator. He needs something that's actually not left, not right. Is actually going to be unbiased.
No, I don't agree, John. He's not going to get that unless it's Fox News, and even then, we get Megan Kelly's. So he has to
go
know
the
that.
way in. Let's get Dan Ball in here.
I don't think that networks that have 6 viewers are really going to be the place to go.
Oh, come on. They got 7.
Well, we got 8, so.
Yeah. We're good.
No, look, I mean, that's not going to happen because the hammerlock that the major networks and cable networks have on these debates, it's just not going to happen.
Well, there's the National Association of Presidential Debates, right?
And they're not going to go to one of those alternative networks. You could try, you can ask, but he has to approach this that it's going to be hostile, it's going to be unfair. They're going to ask stupid questions. And, you just have to know that. And you have to be ready for that. Abortion, should have been ready for it. January 6th, should have been ready for it. Criminal convictions, should have been ready for it. Those are things he should have been ready for and knocked out of the park. And he was discombobulated.
Yeah,
I mean, look, that said,
he's talked about many times.
If you just listen to the debate, it sounded pretty good for him. If you just listen to the audio, don't watch it, listen to it, it came out pretty good. Kamala, it didn't come out so well. If you watch it, if you can look past the condescending attitude, I love that. I will give ABC credit for that. They did have both of them on camera when she was reacting. I mean, but I think they did it for the wrong reasons. I suspect they colluded with her team because she had staged. She'd rehearsed all that, and they wanted her to come off as clever, attractive, and sassy. She came off as arrogant and disrespectful and rude and condescending. That's how she came off.
And she kept trying to interrupt him.
But there was the one time.
But he interrupted her a couple times too.
There was the one time, that one thing she did that I don't think she ever did any other time during the debate. Whenever he called her a Marxist, and mind you, they were standing up, and she did this thing where she had her hand on her head, the chin on her hand, and looking at him, which is something she never did any other time. And she's apparently done that on a few times when she's been nervous in the past, or some people said it's her tail right there. Whenever she does something like this. And whenever it's not a natural thing. If you had your hand rested on the table, putting your chin on your hand or something like that, more natural. But standing up is very unnatural, so it's more of a tell.
Oh, it was incredibly unnatural.
It's a thing to calm her, or
right, exactly. That's exactly what it was. But I mean, look, some people have, it's great if you know what people's tells are. I mean, I figured out Joe Biden's tells back in 1980s. Every time he opens his mouth, he's lying. It's his tell.
Yeah. So apparently, so was Kamala. Did you guys happen to notice she was emulating Barack Obama very well during the debate?
Tried to, yeah.
Trying to.
She's trying to bring that on, to bring that kind of familiarity with viewers that, with Barack Obama.
There is one time that Trump did flip the script on her because she'd been rude with people in past, like when she called Joe Biden a racist. Excuse me, I'm talking here, and she got away with it. But she interrupted Trump. And Trump is, excuse me, pardon me, I'm talking.
Me.
Oh, that was brilliant. Trump was on the money there. He was ready for that, and that was well done. Amy said that she's very disappointed that she never brought up Venn diagrams.
Right.
I love Venn diagrams. I love Jacques Cousteau.
And maybe she could explain, where do some of the things that Trump supports overlaps with you? Explain it with your Venn diagram. And she would ask, what's a Venn diagram? What's that again? It's where your interests overlap right there, essentially. We're in the middle. What's in the middle?
We should ask her about the Overton window, huh?
Yeah, but somebody had probably told her about that, and she talked about it for years as vice president. Probably has no idea what the heck it is, but somebody told her about it.
At the end of last night's event, all I can say is I'm unburdened by what has been.
Right. And the passage of time in the school buses that go round and round on the merry-go-round. I don't know.
But the thing that's really annoying about the whole thing is how she kept going on about being civil and not the past and yada yada. But all she did was harken back to the past, and she basically called Trump. She said that Trump calls people names. He's a bully. She called him extreme. But I mean, she kept cutting Trump off. She called him names all the time. She called him extreme. She said that he was weak in national security. He's a convicted criminal. All this. I mean, she's the one that was calling people names over and over again.
That's
and then she's
what the left does.
I know, but I mean, it's just ironic in the midst of her saying it right there in the debate.
Yeah.
But the moment I found that was pretty entertaining, because this has never been shared before. I've never heard. Oh, well, we're not going to stop the Second Amendment. Of course you're not. You have no authority over it. But anyway, I'm not stupid. I know how the
she claimed
Constitution
to be
works.
a gun owner, right?
That's where I'm going. She says, Tim Walz and I both own guns. I'm like, really? What are they, 22s?
BB guns.
And they were. She was all to it. The climate change question got in there. Actually, I thought Trump handled that pretty well, given the scope of things. But she's all proud of the fact that they pissed $1 trillion down the drain with their clean energy. I'm like, oh, please spare me. This is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. But she's the one who kept bringing up the past. She kept talking about Trump. January 6th, talking about Trump, a threat to democracy. Talking about Trump. You know, he does this, he does that. And she kept saying, we need to look to the future. We need to move, especially in her closing remarks, we need to move past the past, get beyond the past. Well, you're the one bringing it up, not Trump. Trump said several times, the election is done and dusted. And we need to move on. We need to save this country for tomorrow. Trump's closing remarks were pretty good. And by the way, that was clearly rehearsed, because that was exactly 2 minutes. Exactly 2 minutes. Right. She ran over 2 minutes, 23 seconds. It's fine. That both of them ran over in their responses at times. So not a big issue.
Right. So
getting caught up in fracking, right? She is not against fracking, and I've said this many, many times, but yet in 2020, there's audio evidence that she was talking about banning fracking in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Trump had some word salad there, saying she wasn't against fracking, and he meant to say she was against fracking. It got confusing. Yeah, no, she's clearly against fracking. She's clearly. Did you see her look when Trump said she raised bail money to get those criminals out of jail in Minneapolis? Of course she did. She tweeted about it. She went out there and asked people to raise money for it. I remember that. I'm like, this is a sitting senator trying to get insurrectionists out of jail. Where's her oath to the Constitution? And then she sits there like, I never did that. Listen, sweetheart, the internet's forever. Forever, baby. You can't scrub that stuff. It's there. If it's not in the Wayback Machine, somebody saved a screenshot of it on some computer somewhere.
I'm sure Google's suppressing those searches.
Oh, my goodness. By the way, her official tweets are required to be retained under the Presidential Records Act.
Yep.
So it will be there, and it's subject to a Freedom of Information Act request from the government. Even though it's on a public domain, you can request it because it's a government record as well. And she did that from her official account. So that's there. I noticed that Nancy Pelosi has scrubbed her website and her Twitter account from when she was the Speaker of the House of the things that she said that were blatant, outright lies about the Trump administration, like Trump banned 350 million people from coming to America. It never happened. It's a lie. Trump hates Muslims. He hates black people because he just prevented them coming from here. Neglecting to point out that the Trump administration, by executive order on the day that he signed the restriction on 6 countries, which didn't ban them from coming, but kept people from immigrating here from those 6 countries, and it affected 30,000 people, not 350 million. The day he did that, he signed executive order that reinstated Chad, a majority black Muslim country in the Sahel, allowing people from there to immigrate to America because they had met the standards. So that stuff she scrubbed from there, but it's still there. It's a matter of public record. And the same thing with Kamala Harris. I don't know what she thinks. These celebrities, these politicians seem to think that the internet is something that's transitory and people forget about things. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I did that. I Googled myself on Facebook or something. You know, I searched myself and I saw some stuff, and I go, "What Jack Wagon wrote that?" I'm looking at it. It's me.
Wow. Speaking of what you went to said or didn't say in the past, Amy, who's South African, reminds us that her comment. She said, "My values have not changed. No one is taking your guns." But on Jimmy Fallon 4 years ago, she was interviewed and she said, "We will issue buybacks for all guns. We need to get guns off the streets." Well, that sounds to me like she's taking guns, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some bright spots that you saw maybe from President Trump? I know you maybe touched on a few of them, but getting away from some of the negative stuff, just more specifically the positives that he should hone in on maybe in the next debate.
Well, I think the positives are the things that weren't mentioned. He didn't discuss his, he just briefly talked about, taxes on Social Security. He should have hammered that home. He did. Actually, that's a bright spot, I should say, because he did give the history. He said it happened in 1984. So, yeah, I'll give more credit for that. That was a good spot. But that's something he's got to talk about, and that's a good spot. He did very well with that, I think, so in retrospect. That was good. And the moderators just moved on from it so quickly. That's probably why it slipped my mind there for a second. That was good. The discussion of the border and the failures of the border and pointing out there's probably a lot more than 11 million. That was a good spot on his part. And some of the stuff he reflected on when he talked about what he did in COVID, when they try to take credit for all the jobs. That was two more good points. When she's like, we create all these jobs. Trump left us a mess. No. You got the bounce back jobs. Those jobs were never lost.
Right.
The people are just illegally prevented from going to work by criminal federal regime and state regimes of fascist totalitarians around the country who deny people the right to go to work over a fictitious, cooked up scam related to a genuine illness. That's the bottom line. So those jobs never disappeared. They weren't created. This is the biggest lie of the Biden administration is that they created all these jobs. They didn't create them. 32 million, 40 million jobs were not lost. They were suspended in animation for a year and a half while this garbage went on. And then companies went back to business and brought people back to work. And unfortunately, a lot of these idiotic companies tried to do distance, work. This worked out pretty well. People can work from home. It doesn't work. Only a handful of people have the dedication and motivation to do their job effectively from home. Most of them sit around and play Minesweeper and drink mint julep instead of doing their darn job.
That sounds like a good day, though. Minesweeper and mint juleps.
Frankly, I would prefer to play Frogger, but I don't have the game in my house.
I'm gonna have somebody make a shirt of you. It's gonna be you, Minesweeper, and mint juleps. And your picture's gonna be right in the middle. I think that's things that happen.
I don't think anybody will get the point of that, but yeah, that's a pretty cool shirt.
I'll get it.
I think to Chris's point though about ineffective work ethics, we see a lot of it with Congress working from home and stuff like that. And it seemed like they were hard to get hold of. It was hard to get anything done with them. Hard to get anything.
They're hard to get a hold of when they're in DC.
I've seen people in regulatory agents the same way. Man, you weren't getting nothing done with these people.
Yeah.
Talking about highlights with Trump, I thought he was really good on the with the wars. Here Kamala's talking about, we've supplied tanks and bombs and stuff to Ukraine, and Trump's like going, I'm just going to use diplomacy and put an end to it. So she's basically talking about perpetuating a war, and he's talking about ending a war.
John, that was another good point because Tom was asking good points. Trump's like, people are dying. These are lives that are being lost. That was very passionate and very much to the point and very poignant. And that was one of his best moments when he talked, and he brought it up a couple of times. This is not about giving arms and selling weapons. And she's like, we relied on all our friends. Relied on our friends. There's no skin in the game. The Germans have got rid of old tanks. The Danes have gotten rid of old F-16s they don't want anymore. They want stealth fighters. All they're doing is cleaning out the woodshed so they can get new stuff. Yeah. And we're financing it. This is ridiculous. The Europeans have not done squat. We have carried the weight, $250 billion. She didn't dispute that because she knows it's actually more than that. We gave Africa an average of, $10 billion a year, $12 billion a year in foreign direct aid. We give Ukraine $250 billion in 2 years, 3 years. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. So Trump did a good job there. Now, the private pile in the chat, not to be confused with the Gomer pile, says that Trump brought Taliban leaders to Camp David and sat down. Yeah, he did, but that went both ways for Trump. She played off as if, you talk to fascist dictators and terrorists. So it played well when he said it, but didn't play well when she responded because he didn't get a chance to rebut it. The point is Trump will talk to people. And what they always talk about is, and she tried this, is you gave away the kitchen sink. No, he put the fear of God into the Taliban.
Yep.
Negotiations sometimes includes threats. And that's what Donald Trump did. It's the same thing with North Korea. With North Korea, didn't have to threaten him. All he had to do was stroke little Kim's ego. And then suddenly North Korea stopped launching intercontinental ballistic missiles over the Sea of Japan, over Japanese airspace, which are acts of war. It no longer happened. And that's all it took was stroking his ego. We didn't have to give them oil like Clinton did, allowing them to survive as a regime. If the Clinton regime had not given the North Koreans oil and wheat and corn in the 1990s, North Korea would have collapsed. Millions of people would have come across those minefields and past those guard posts and risked their lives because they were starving to death anyway, and North Korea would cease to have existed in the 1990s. But no, the Clinton administration had to enable them, just like the Iranian regime. $300 billion under Obama, and this clown and his little protege there. By the way, what was I watching the other day? People keep saying mentees. There's no such thing. It's a mentor and a protege. Mentees are mints that come from the Netherlands. They're called Mentos. Good Lord. They're not mentees. They're proteges. Look the darn word up. I'm so sick of people butchering the English language. There's no zers and zems and z's. His, her, he, she, it. That's how it works. Learn the English language. If you don't like it, learn another language. I recommend Russian or Farsi.
I've tried to learn several different languages, and it seems to me I always get it as quickly as I learn it. I don't use it for anything.
John, sorry, another one comes to point. This is where Trump failed to knock it out of the park again. Gaza. This is what he should have said. And it's the longer version, but he could have truncated this. Look what's happened in the Middle East. My administration negotiated the first comprehensive peace plan of multi-nations in the region. No one's ever achieved that. Israel achieved peace with Morocco, with the Arab Emirates, with Sudan, with all these countries in the Arab world. They were at peace. Israel and Morocco are cooperating. They have exchanges, cultural, scientific. They're doing joint military exercises. El Al flights and Air Morocco flights fly between the two countries. That's never happened. We achieved that. The Abraham Accords, historic. There was peace in the region. Now the place is on fire again, just like it was under my predecessor, Barack Hussein Obama. You have destroyed peace in the Middle East through your inaction, your incompetence, and emboldening actors like Hamas to take action by your failures in Afghanistan, your failures in Myanmar, your failures in Niger, your failures in Mauritania, your failures in Somalia, your failures in Ukraine. You have collapsed world security. We restored security. We ended wars in Syria. We destroyed ISIS in 4 months. We ended a war in Iraq. We ended a war in Afghanistan. You have collapsed global security, you and your regime. And where have you been, Kamala? You're proud of being the last person in the room. You didn't accomplish anything. Boom, done and dusted. Trump wins.
Next topic. Yep. Absolutely.
Trump leads, America succeeds.
Trump leads,
There you
America
go.
succeeds.
I like that one.
I love it.
So Pablo Charlie here's bringing up about when they spoke about foreign policy. Trump should remind people with the ease of all these actions were taken by Hamas and Putin. Are we really going to trust Harris with defending Taiwan? Honestly, I don't think she'd want to defend Taiwan. She'd just turn it over to China.
I don't trust Harris defending Harrisburg.
No.
Hey, there's another one.
He's on a roll.
I'm on fire, man.
So we got a few minutes left, Todd, but is Thomas McKinley, is he related to you by any chance?
My brother, yeah. What's up?
Oh, your brother says we've carried NATO for years and the other members need to do their part. Trump had that in line.
Absolutely.
He's right. Trump
He did, but once again, that's one of those things gets convoluted because the way he did it was ham-fisted during his administration. What he said is that what he should have said is NATO partners agreed a decade ago to pay 2% of GDP towards their own national defense as part of NATO. Only a handful of countries, including the Baltic states like Estonia, Poland, and the United States, actually achieved that. Germany, France, Canada failed to do it. They're getting a free ride at our expense. Until they start committing 2% of their gross domestic product to their own defense, we are going to consider not providing our defensive shield. That's what you say. That's the home run.
Yep. Well, here we got maybe a couple minutes left. I want to touch on my brother real quick. On 9/11, he was actually stationed at Fort Belvoir, and they were actually doing some gunnery down at Fort Lee. And they were told that they needed RTB, return to base. And once they lifted off, and then the Blackhawks, they could see the smoke billowing from the Pentagon. They were like wondering what the heck's going on. And of course, after that, they flew many missions in and out of the Pentagon. One of them was to go, and I don't think it was his aircraft, but it was another aircraft from his unit to go pick up the SecDef, and he refused to leave. But they flew many different supplies in and out of the Pentagon, and I think even body parts as well. And also at the same time, they flew something up from the DARPA, Defense Agency for Advanced Research Project Agency, a special device up to the ground zero up in New York.
It was an iPad.
No, but it basically could see even through the flames, see if there were bodies or anything like that. I don't know what the device was, but I think it's probably on the market now with private fire departments and public fire departments now. But it was a very advanced piece of equipment at that point, and of course, I guess once they took it up there, immediately unclassified it, so they allowed it to be reproduced and all this stuff. But he did several missions or in and around D.C. and of course up to New York and Shanksville as well. He flew Governor Tom Ridge, who eventually became the Secretary of Homeland Security, up to Shanksville.
Yeah. No, there we go. Todd, take us out.
All right, take care, sir. We'll see you everybody next week, 7 to 9 Eastern, right here on WSMN 59 AM, 95.3 FM, the Common Sense Conservatives. Take care. God bless everybody.